At 17, Leo was told he and his 12-year-old sister were out of time. What he discovered behind a forgotten wall would change not just their future, but their entire past. If you've ever felt like the world had given up on you, stick around because this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button and let's get into it. The clock on the kitchen wall wasn't ticking. It had stopped at 3:15 2 years ago, the day we arrived at the Miller house. And in 2 years, no one had bothered to change the battery. It was a perfect metaphor. We were living in stop time, a pause between one part of life ending and the next, uncertain one beginning. Mrs. Miller stood with her arms crossed, her floral apron pulled tight across her stomach. It was a cheerful apron, covered in smiling daisies, but her face was anything but. "Leo, you'll be 18 in 2 weeks," she said, her voice flat, as if she were reading a grocery list. "The county funds stop on your birthday. We've loved having you and Maya, we really have, but we're not equipped for post-system arrangements." Post-system arrangements. It sounded like a procedure for disposing of hazardous waste. I looked over at my sister Maya, who was sitting at the Formica table, meticulously coloring in a drawing of a horse. She was small for 12, with my grandmother's dark, serious eyes. She hadn't looked up, but I saw her knuckles go white around her green crayon. She knew. She always knew. "Where are we supposed to go?" I asked. My voice came out smaller than I wanted it to, a boy's voice when I needed a man's. "That's for your caseworker to sort out," Mr. Miller grunted from his recliner in the next room, the television blaring some game show. He hadn't even bothered to come into the kitchen. We were a conversation happening in the commercial break. "They'll find a place for the girl. You're on your own, son. That's the law." The girl. Not Maya. Just the girl. A problem to be relocated, and I was son, but not theirs. Just a label before I became a statistic. 2 years of setting their table, mowing their lawn, walking their yapping little dog. 2 years of Maya getting A's in a school she hated. Of me working after classes at a greasy spoon diner to save money I knew would never be enough. 2 years of pretending we were a family, and it all ended with a shrug in a silent kitchen. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was the familiar, metallic taste of fear. Fear for Maya. If they separated us, I didn't know what I'd do, what she'd do. We were all each other had left since Gran passed. Later that night, long after the Millers were asleep, I lay on my cot in the converted attic space they called a bedroom. The air was thin and cold. Maya was in her room downstairs, and the thought of a wall and a floor between us felt like a chasm. I stared at the water-stained ceiling, tracing the cracks with my eyes. They looked like a map to nowhere. This was the moment everyone in the system dreads, the cliff edge of adulthood you're pushed towards, ready or not. And I was not ready. I had $412 saved up, a duffel bag of worn-out clothes, and a sister who looked at me like I could hold the world on my shoulders. I couldn't even hold our lives together for another month. My phone buzzed on the floor, a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, figuring it was a wrong number, but something made me answer. "Leo?" a woman's voice asked. It was calm and professional, the kind of voice that costs a lot of money per hour. "Yeah, who's this?" "My name is Catherine Albright. I'm an attorney. I was the executor of your grandmother Elena's estate." My heart hammered against my ribs. Gran. We hadn't been allowed to go to the funeral. The system decided it would be too disruptive. I hadn't heard her name spoken out loud by a stranger in years. "Her estate?" I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "She had nothing. We had nothing. That's why we're in this mess." There was a pause on the other end. "That's not entirely accurate, Leo. She had the farm." The farm. I'd almost forgotten. A place I hadn't seen since I was 6 years old. A collection of hazy memories, the smell of hay and rain, the rough bark of an apple tree, Gran's hands, calloused and warm, showing me how to pull a carrot from the earth. It was a ghost of a place, not a real one. It's a wreck, I said. The county said it was condemned, worth less than the taxes owed on it. The county was mistaken, or at least premature, Ms. Albright said carefully. Your grandmother spent the last decade of her life in a very complicated, very quiet legal fight to keep it. She paid off the last of the back taxes the month before she passed. It's yours, Leo. And Maya's. The deed is in your names, held in trust until you turn 18. The air in the attic suddenly felt thick, heavy. I sat up, swinging my legs over the side of the cot. Mine? Yes. There's a problem, though. The debt wasn't just taxes. There's a private mortgage on it, an old one, and the bank has issued a foreclosure notice. They've been sending letters to my office for years. Now that you're coming of age, they're ready to collect. They want to auction the property in 30 days. The hope that had flared in my chest died just as quickly. Of course. There was always a catch, always a boot coming down just when you thought you might be able to stand up. So we own a place we're about to lose. Great. Perhaps, she said, and for the first time, I heard something other than professionalism in her voice. A hint of something else. Your grandmother was a very stubborn, very intelligent woman, Leo. She left a package for you at my office. She was very specific about the instructions. You were to receive it on your 18th birthday or in the event of an emergency. I think being kicked out of your foster home qualifies as an emergency, don't you? An emergency. That was one word for it. It was the end of the world. Maybe. Or maybe, just maybe, it was something else. A map to somewhere. The next morning, I told Maya we were leaving. I didn't tell her about the farm, not yet. I just told her we were going on a trip, just the two of us. I packed our bags while the Millers were at church. One duffel for me, one unicorn-themed backpack for her. She didn't ask any questions. She just watched me with those big, solemn eyes, and when I was done, she slipped her small hand into mine. Her trust was a physical weight. It was terrifying, and it was the only thing holding me upright. We walked out the front door without a goodbye, the broken kitchen clock still stuck on 3:15. We left it behind. Our time was starting again. Ms. Albright's office was in a part of the city I'd only ever seen in movies. Tall glass buildings that scraped the clouds, people in sharp suits moving with a purpose I couldn't imagine having. Her office was on the 34th floor. The elevator ride was silent and smooth, and for a moment, I felt like we were ascending to a different world. Maya pressed her face against the glass wall of the waiting room, looking down at the city like it was a toy set. It's so big, she whispered. Yeah, I said, my own reflection looking back at me from the polished marble floor. A skinny kid in a hoodie, looking like he'd stumbled into the wrong life. Miss Albright was older than she sounded, with kind eyes framed by wire-rimmed glasses and a sharp gray bob. She didn't look down on us. She looked at us. She shook my hand firmly and then knelt down to shake Maya's, which made my sister give a rare, shy smile. Your grandmother was a force of nature, she said, leading us into a conference room with a view that stretched for miles. She reminded me of my own mother, stubborn as a mule and twice as smart. She placed a heavy, sealed manila envelope on the gleaming wooden table. My name was written on it in Gran's familiar, spidery cursive. Just seeing her handwriting made my throat tighten. She told me this was more important than any legal document I could ever file for her, Ms. Albright explained. She said it was a key, not to a safe, but to a story. She slid the envelope across the table. There's also a set of keys in there, and the deed. As I said on the phone, the situation is precarious. The bank, Northgate Financial, is aggressive. They've been trying to get that land for years. A development corporation, a subsidiary of theirs, wants to put a highway bypass through that valley. Your farm is the last holdout. An antagonistic force. A corporation. It felt unreal, like a villain from a movie. How are we supposed to fight a bank? What do we do? I asked, my hand hovering over the envelope. Legally, you have very few options. You could try to sell it to them, take what little they offer after the debt is paid, and walk away with a few $1,000s. It would be a fresh start. She paused, her gaze steady. Or you could go there, see what your grandmother was fighting so hard to protect. The choice is yours, Leo, but you need to make it soon. A few $1,000s. It sounded like a fortune. Enough to get an apartment, to keep Maya with me. It was the sensible choice, the safe choice. But then I looked at the envelope. A key to a story. Gran didn't save things without a reason. She wasn't a sentimental woman when it came to objects. She was sentimental about people, about family, about dirt and roots. I picked up the envelope. It was heavier than it looked. We'll go, I said, the words feeling solid and real in the sterile room. We'll go to the farm. Maya looked up at me, a question in her eyes. I just nodded, trying to project a confidence I was miles away from feeling. Ms. Albright gave a slow, approving nod. I thought you might say that, she said. Your grandmother would be proud. I've included a bus schedule and a small cashier's check from the last of her savings account. It's not much, but it should get you there and buy you some groceries. Call me when you get there. And Leo, she added, her expression turning serious. Be careful. People who want something that isn't theirs can be persuasive. The bus ride was 8 hours long. We watched the city bleed into suburbs, then into sprawling towns, and finally into wide, empty countryside. The landscape grew poorer with every mile. The buildings sagged, the paint peeled. We were traveling back in time, it felt like. Maya slept for most of the journey, her head resting on my shoulder, her small body curled against mine. I stayed awake, watching the green and brown blur of the world go by, the heavy envelope sitting on my lap like a stone. What was I doing? I was a 17-year-old kid with a 12-year-old sister, heading to a condemned farm in the middle of nowhere to face off against a bank. It was insane. The sensible part of my brain, the part that had been trained by years in the system to keep my head down and expect the worst, was screaming at me to turn back, to take the money and run. But another part of me, a deeper, quieter part that sounded a lot like my grandmother, whispered, "Home is worth fighting for." We got off the bus in a town called Harmony Creek. The name was a cruel joke. It was a single street with a boarded-up general store, a gas station with rusted pumps, and a diner with a flickering neon sign. The air smelled of damp earth and loneliness. The bus pulled away, leaving us in a cloud of diesel fumes. 2 kids, with 2 bags, on the side of a forgotten highway. A beat-up pickup truck was waiting, just as Ms. Albright had arranged. The driver was an old man named Silas, with a face like a weathered map and hands that looked like they were carved from wood. He didn't say much, just loaded our bags into the back and grunted, "You're Elena's grandkids, then?" "Yes, sir," I said. He just nodded, chewing on a toothpick. She was a good woman, tougher than a $2 steak. He gestured for us to get in. The truck's cab smelled of oil and coffee and something vaguely like livestock. The drive to the farm was another 5 miles down a winding dirt road, trees pressing in on either side, their branches interlocking overhead to form a tunnel. It felt like we were leaving the known world behind. Then, the trees broke, and Silas pulled the truck to a stop. "Here you are," he said, his voice softer than I expected. We were looking at a valley, nestled between 2 low, rolling hills. And in the center of it, looking small and fragile under the vast gray sky, was the farm. The house was a simple, two-story clapboard structure, its white paint faded to a ghostly gray. A sagging porch wrapped around the front. Beside it stood a large barn, its red paint almost entirely stripped away by weather and time, leaving the wood beneath exposed and silvered. The fields around them were overgrown with weeds and wildflowers, a wild, untamed sea of green and gold. It wasn't condemned, it was just sleeping. "Doesn't look like much now," Silas said, reading my mind. "But your grandmother, she saw something else. She used to say this land had good bones." He helped us with our bags and gave me a slip of paper with his number on it. "Call if you need anything. Town's not much, but folks look out for their own." Elena was one of our own. He tipped his hat and drove off, the truck's engine fading until it was swallowed by the silence. And then we were alone. Just me, Maya, and the farm. The silence was absolute. No traffic, no sirens, no game shows blaring from the next room. Just the whisper of the wind through the tall grass and the distant cry of a hawk. It was the loudest silence I had ever heard. Maya, who had been quiet the whole trip, let go of my hand and ran into the field, her laughter echoing in the wide open space. She twirled in the weeds, her arms outstretched, a splash of color against the muted landscape. For the first time in a long time, she looked like a kid, not a case file, not the girl. Just a kid. I walked up to the house, the old keys from the envelope feeling heavy in my hand. The porch steps groaned under my weight. The first key I tried didn't fit. Neither did the second. My heart started to sink. What if we couldn't even get in? On the third try, the old lock groaned, resisted, and then clicked open with a sound that seemed to echo through the valley. The air that rushed out was stale, thick with the scent of dust and old wood, and something else. Something that smelled like memories. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Light struggled through the grimy windows, illuminating a world coated in a thick layer of dust. Furniture stood draped in white sheets, like ghosts in a silent play. A grandfather clock stood silent in the corner. A stack of old newspapers sat on a coffee table, the top one dated from years ago. It was a house where time had stopped, just like the clock in the miller's kitchen. But this was different. This wasn't neglect. It felt preserved, waiting. "Wow," Maya breathed from behind me, her eyes wide. "It's like a castle." It was no castle, but I knew what she meant. It was ours. Every dusty corner, every creaking floorboard, every ghostly piece of furniture. It belonged to us. The feeling was so new, so overwhelming. I had to lean against the doorframe to steady myself. This was home. Or it could be, if we could keep it. That night, we opened the envelope. Inside, along with the keys and the deed, was a single, thick, yellowed letter addressed to me. Gran's handwriting. I sat on the dusty floor with Maya curled up beside me, a flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, and I began to read her words. "My dearest Leo," it began. "If you are reading this, then I am gone, and you are in trouble. I am sorry for both. I am sorry I could not be there to see you become a man. I know you will be a good one. You have a strong heart, the same heart your great-grandfather had." My great-grandfather. I knew almost nothing about him. Gran never spoke of him. His name was Arthur. That's all I knew. "I have not told you the full story of this place," the letter continued. "No one knows it. I am telling you now because you will need more than strength to hold on to this land. You will need the truth. The banks, the lawyers, they think this farm is just a piece of dirt in their way. They are wrong. This farm is a promise. Your great-grandfather, Arthur, bought this land in 1946, right after the war. He came back from Europe a changed man, quiet and haunted by what he'd seen. He wanted nothing more than to build something that would last, something peaceful. But the world doesn't always let a man be peaceful. The letter went on to describe the early years. How Arthur and my great-grandmother built the house with their own hands. How they planted the orchards and raised the livestock. It painted a picture of a life that was hard but good, a life tied to the seasons and the soil. But then the tone of the letter shifted. In the early 50s, things got difficult. A powerful man in the county wanted this valley. He started buying up all the farms, pressuring people, threatening them. Your great-grandfather was the only one who refused to sell. He believed a man's land was his soul. This man, he did not like being told no. He made life impossible for them. He cut off their credit at the store, had their loans called in, sabotaged their equipment. He was trying to starve them out. I could feel a slow burn of anger in my chest. This wasn't just about a modern corporation. This was an old fight, a generational one. Arthur was not a man who backed down. But he was also not a fool. He knew he couldn't win a straight fight. He was just a farmer against a rich man with the whole county in his pocket. So he found another way to fight. He started to make the farm look worthless. He let the fields go fallow, one by one. He stopped painting the barn. He sold off the livestock. From the outside, it looked like he was failing, like he was giving up. His neighbors thought he'd lost his mind, but he was hiding the farm's value in plain sight. I looked around the dark, dusty room. The peeling paint, the overgrown fields. It wasn't decay. It was camouflage. But that wasn't the most important secret, Gran's letter concluded. He built something. A failsafe. A place to keep the heart of the farm safe until it was needed. He said it was for his children's children, for a time when the world was different, when his family might need a foundation to stand on. He sealed it away, and the knowledge of it was passed down only to me. Now I pass it to you. Go to the barn, Leo. On the west wall, the one that faces the old oak tree. Measure 20 feet from the north corner and 4 feet up. Your future is in that wall. Be brave. I love you. My hands were trembling when I finished reading. Maya was fast asleep, her breathing soft and even. A failsafe. A future in a wall. It sounded like something out of a fantasy novel, but the letter felt real. Gran's love, her fear, her hope. It was all there in the ink on the page. The next morning, I went to the barn. The massive sliding doors groaned in protest as I forced them open, revealing a cavernous space filled with dusty light and the ghosts of 100 harvests. The air was thick with the smell of old hay, engine oil, and dry rot. Ancient, rusted farm equipment sat in the shadows like sleeping iron beasts. I found the west wall easily. It was made of thick, fieldstone blocks, chinked with old mortar. I paced off 20 feet from the corner, my heart thudding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. I found a rusty tape measure on a workbench and measured 4 feet up from the dirt floor. There was nothing there, just solid stone. My hope crumbled. It was just a story. A desperate fantasy from an old woman. Maybe grief had clouded her mind at the end. I slumped against the wall, defeated. What was I going to do now? Call Ms. Albright, tell her we were giving up, sell our history for a few $1,000s and a bus ticket back to nowhere. I ran my hand over the cold, rough stone, my fingers tracing the lines of mortar, and then I felt it. A slight give. One of the stones, no different from the others to the eye, shifted less than a millimeter under the pressure of my hand. I pushed again, harder. It moved. My breath caught in my throat. I wedged my fingers into the crack and pulled. The stone was heavy, but it scraped backward, revealing not more stone, but a dark, hollow space behind it. I peered into the darkness. There was a small, recessed iron ring, a handle. I pulled, and a whole section of the stone wall, cleverly mounted on hidden hinges, swung inward with a deep, grinding groan that echoed through the silent barn. It opened onto a set of steep, narrow stone steps leading down into absolute blackness. A wave of cold, musty air washed over me. a smell of earth and time and secrets. "Maya!" I yelled, my voice cracking with excitement. "Maya, you have to see this!" She came running, her eyes growing wide as she saw the gaping hole in the wall. "What is it?" I think it's what Gran was talking about," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I think it's our future." We found an old oil lantern and, after a few tries, I got it lit. Holding it aloft, I led the way down the steps, Maya clutching the back of my jacket. The stone steps were slick with dampness. 10 steps down, 12, 15. And then our feet touched a packed earth floor. I raised the lantern. We were in a small, dry cellar, no bigger than a bedroom. The walls were lined with empty wooden shelves. In the center of the room sat a single object, a large metal footlocker, the kind soldiers use. It was army green with the name A. Peterson stenciled in white on the lid. My great-grandfather, Arthur Peterson. It wasn't locked. The latches were stiff, but they opened with a loud snap. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely lift the lid. I don't know what I expected. Gold bars, piles of cash. It was nothing like that. The chest was filled with papers, stacks and stacks of them, all neatly bundled with twine. And on top of the papers sat another box, a small, wooden one. I lifted the wooden box out and opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, were two things. A stack of about 20 letters, tied with a faded blue ribbon, and beneath them, a thick ledger book, the kind used for accounting. I opened the ledger. The pages were filled with my great-grandfather's precise, masculine handwriting. It wasn't a record of farm expenses. It was a journal. We took the box and the first bundle of letters back to the house. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the valley, we sat on the porch steps and I untied the blue ribbon. The letters were from my great-grandmother, Sarah, written to Arthur while he was away at war. They were love letters, full of hope and longing and fear. They spoke of her dreams for the farm, for their future, for the family they hoped to build. They made these people I'd never known feel real, alive. They made this land feel sacred. But it was the journal, Arthur's journal, that held the real secret. I opened it to the first page. The entry was dated June 1953. "The pressure from Henderson is becoming unbearable," it began. Henderson? That must have been the man Gran's letter mentioned. He's a vulture in a fancy suit. He thinks because I'm just a farmer, I'm a simpleton. He wants this valley, and he will stop at nothing to get it. He offered me a pittance today, told me it was my last chance before he ruined me. I told him my land wasn't for sale. He didn't like that. I read for hours, Maya having long since fallen asleep beside me. The journal was a detailed account of a quiet, desperate war. Henderson had, as Gran said, tried to starve them out. But Arthur was meticulous. He documented everything. Every threat, every act of sabotage, every crooked deal Henderson made with the county officials. He had names, dates, amounts. He was building a case. But then, the journal entries took a darker turn. Henderson, frustrated by Arthur's refusal to break, had escalated his tactics. He'd hired men to intimidate them, to damage their property. One entry described finding his prize bull dead in the field, a clean shot through its heart. The sheriff had called it a hunting accident. Arthur knew better. "I cannot protect my family this way," he wrote, his handwriting more agitated than in earlier entries. "Fighting him in the open is a fool's game. He owns the board. He owns the players. I must change the game. I cannot save the farm's body, not right now, but I can save its soul." That was when his plan began to form. The plan to make the farm look worthless. He wrote about the pain it caused him to neglect the fields he loved, to see the barn he built with his own hands fall into disrepair. It was a form of self-inflicted wound, a strategic retreat. And then I found the entry that changed everything. Henderson's greed is his weakness, Arthur wrote. He doesn't just want the land, he wants it for a specific price. He's leveraged himself to the hilt with Northgate Financial to fund his acquisitions, assuming he could get all the properties for pennies on the dollar. He has to acquire my land to complete the parcel for his development deal. My refusal is costing him money, a lot of it. Northgate Financial, the same bank that was trying to foreclose on us. This wasn't a new debt, it was the ghost of an old one. I kept reading, my heart pounding. I have sold the last of our hidden assets, the final entry read, dated 1962. Sarah thinks the money is for us to run away, to start over somewhere else. I have let her believe that. What I have actually done is something else. I have taken every last cent we have, and I have done something Henderson would never expect. I have paid his debt. I stopped. I read the sentence again. I have paid his debt. It made no sense. Why would he pay the debt of the man trying to ruin him? He borrowed from Northgate against the value of the entire Valley project, the journal explained. A massive loan. I have made a payment on his account, not as Arthur Peterson, but as an anonymous benefactor. A large enough payment to satisfy the principal on the portion of the loan that corresponds to the value of my own land. I have the cashier's receipt and a signed letter from the bank's loan officer at the time, a man named Miller, who owed me a favor from the war, confirming the specific allocation of the funds. Henderson will never know. The bank will file it away. The loan will appear active, but the portion secured by my property is, in effect, paid in full. It is a poison pill hidden inside his own finances. It creates a title defect, a lien that is legally satisfied but administratively invisible. No one will be able to get a clean title to my land without uncovering this, and they will have no reason to look. It is the only way. I will seal this cellar. I will let the farm sleep. I pray that one day, one of my own will be smart enough and brave enough to wake it up. I stared at the page, my mind reeling. My great-grandfather hadn't just retreated. He'd laid a brilliant hidden trap. He'd paid off his own mortgage, but disguised it as a payment on his enemy's loan, creating a legal paradox that would protect the land for decades. In the bottom of the footlocker, tucked into a special envelope, I found them. A faded cashier's receipt for a staggering amount of money, and a brittle, notarized letter from Northgate Financial, dated 1962, confirming that the funds were to be applied specifically against the collateral represented by the Peterson farm parcel. It was the soul of the farm, the proof, the weapon we needed. A wave of emotion washed over me, so intense it was dizzying. Grief for the man I never knew, for the hardship he and my great-grandmother endured. Awe at his quiet, stubborn genius, and a fierce, burning pride that I was his blood. He hadn't given up. He had sacrificed everything, his reputation, his comfort, his entire life's work, to plant a seed of hope in a dark cellar for a future generation he would never meet. For me, for Maya. And then came the crushing weight of responsibility. This wasn't a game, this was a legacy. He had passed the torch to Gran, and now Gran had passed it to me. What was I supposed to do with it? The smart thing, the safe thing, was still to sell. Presenting this 60-year-old document to a modern bank would be a nightmare. It would be a long, expensive fight. A fight we couldn't afford. We could take the documents to the developers, use them as leverage to get a better price, walk away with $50,000 instead of $5,000. That was the logical move. But my great-grandfather didn't make the logical move. He made the right one. He chose the harder path. He chose home. I looked over at Maya, sleeping peacefully on the dusty porch, her face soft in the moonlight. What kind of future did I want to build for her? One based on running away, or one based on standing your ground? The next day, I called Ms. Albright. I told her everything. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Leo," she finally said, her voice filled with a stunned respect. "Your great-grandfather was either a madman or a genius." "I think he was a bit of both," I said. "This changes things," she said, a new energy in her voice. This is incredible. A 60-year-old title defect. It's a legal nightmare for them. But it's a long shot, Leo. A very long shot. They will fight this with everything they have. They'll try to bury us in paperwork, bleed us dry. They'll argue the documents are invalid, that the statute of limitations has passed. It could take years. "Do we have a chance?" I asked, my voice small. "A chance?" She chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Yes, we have a chance. A puncher's chance. But it won't be easy, and it won't be free. I'll have to file injunctions, motions. My firm will take this on pro bono for as long as we can, but there will be court fees, expert witness fees." The hope that had soared in me began to plummet. Money. It always came down to money. We had nothing. "We don't have any money," I said, the words tasting like ash. "I know," she said softly. "Leo, I have to advise you as your lawyer. The most sensible option is to use these documents to negotiate a larger settlement. You could walk away with enough to secure a real future for you and your sister." There it was again. The easy way out. The sensible path. For a moment, I let myself imagine it. A clean, new apartment. No leaks in the roof. No fear of foreclosure. Maya in a good school. Me, maybe going to community college. It was a good dream. A safe dream. I looked out at the overgrown fields, at the silvered wood of the barn. I thought of Arthur, writing in his journal by candlelight, sacrificing his present for our future. I thought of Gran, fighting her own quiet battles for years to protect his secret. This farm wasn't just land. It was a story. It was our story. And you don't sell your soul, even for a safe dream. "No," I said, the word coming out clear and strong. "We're not selling. We're going to fight." There was another pause. When Ms. Albright spoke again, her voice was different. The lawyer was gone. It was just a person, talking to another person. "Good," she said. "Your grandmother would have said the same thing. Okay, Leo, let's get to work." The first letter from Northgate's lawyers arrived a week later. It was delivered by a courier in a fancy car that looked alien on our dirt road. The letter was thick, full of legal jargon, but the message was simple. Our claim was baseless, the documents were fraudulent, and if we pursued this, they would countersue us for everything we had, which was, ironically, the very thing we were fighting for. It was a threat, designed to scare us off. And it almost worked. Reading it, I felt that old, familiar fear creep back in. Who was I to take on a massive corporation? I was just a kid who'd found a box in a cellar. That night, a storm rolled in. Rain lashed against the windows, and the wind howled around the corners of the old house. Maya was scared of thunder. I sat with her in the living room, the lantern casting dancing shadows on the walls. We were huddled under a dusty sheet we'd found, and the house groaned and creaked around us like a living thing. "Are they going to make us leave again, Leo?" she asked, her voice trembling. I pulled her closer. "No," I said, trying to make my voice sound braver than I felt. "No one is ever making us leave again. This is our home. We're going to stay right here." Saying the words out loud made them feel more real. It was a promise. To her, to Gran, to a great-grandfather I'd never met. The next few months were a blur of hard work and anxiety. The legal battle raged on in the background, a slow, grinding war of paperwork and motions that Ms. Albright handled with a quiet tenacity. We barely had enough money for food, let alone court fees. We started a garden in the overgrown patch behind the house, planting seeds we bought with the last of Gran's money. We learned to fish in the creek that ran through the bottom of the valley. Silas, the old farmer who'd driven us here, started stopping by once a week. He never said much, but he'd leave a box of eggs on the porch, or a jug of milk, or a bag of vegetables from his own garden. One day he showed up with 2 of his sons, and they spent the entire weekend helping me patch the worst of the leaks in the roof. He stood with me on the porch as they were finishing up, looking out at the valley. "This is good land," he said. "Henderson, his daddy, his whole damn family, they never understood that. They just saw dollar signs. Your great-granddaddy, he saw a home. There's a difference." The community, small as it was, began to notice us. The woman who ran the diner started giving us leftovers at the end of the day. The librarian helped me use their public computers to research historical land rights and precedents that might help our case. People were wary at first, but they had long memories. They remembered the Hendersons and their bullying tactics. They remembered my great-grandfather's stubborn pride. We weren't just 2 kids fighting a bank. We were the continuation of an old story, and people started quietly choosing a side, our side. But the pressure was immense. The developers sent a man out to the farm. He was slick and smooth, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He parked his luxury sedan at the end of our driveway and walked up to the porch where I was trying to fix a broken step. "Leo, right?" he said, offering a hand I didn't take. "I'm Mark. I'm with the development group. Listen, I think we got off on the wrong foot here. We're prepared to make you a very generous offer. Life-changing money, son. Enough for you and your sister to go anywhere, do anything. $100,000. Clean. No fight, no fuss." $100,000. The number hung in the air, shimmering. It was an impossible sum. It was the easy way out, gift-wrapped and tied with a bow. I could feel the sensible part of my brain screaming at me to take it. "Our farm isn't for sale," I said, my voice tight. His smile tightened. "Look, kid, I admire your spirit, I really do. But you need to be realistic. Your little legal stunt isn't going to work. We have a team of lawyers who will drag this out until you're old and gray. You'll lose. You'll end up with nothing. I'm offering you something. It's the smart play." "This isn't about being smart," I said, looking past him to the barn, to the place where Arthur's secret had waited for 60 years. "It's about what's right." He scoffed, shaking his head as he walked back to his car. "Right doesn't pay the bills, kid." He was wrong. Maybe right didn't pay the bills in cash, but it paid in other ways. It paid in the way Maya was starting to laugh again, a full, free sound that echoed in the fields. It paid in the quiet satisfaction of eating a tomato we had grown ourselves. It paid in the approving nod from Silas, a man who measured wealth in character, not currency. The turning point came 6 months after we arrived. Ms. Albright called, her voice electric with excitement. "They blinked, Leo," she said. "They made a mistake." The developers, impatient and arrogant, had started doing preliminary survey work on the surrounding properties they already owned. In their haste, they had submitted a planning document to the county that included our farm, listing it as pending acquisition. But in that document, to justify their projected costs, they had to include a title search history. And their own researchers, digging deep into the county archives, had found it. They'd found the poison pill, a note in the margin of the old Northgate loan ledger, made by that long-dead loan officer, referencing a paid-off collateral lien tied to the Peterson property. They had tried to bury it, but in their own paperwork, they had accidentally proven our case for us. "They're offering to settle, Leo," Ms. Albright said. They'll drop the foreclosure. They'll officially recognize the mortgage as satisfied. They'll relinquish any and all claims to the property. In return, you agree not to sue them for fraudulent foreclosure proceedings. I was speechless. We won? You won, she confirmed, and I could hear the smile in her voice. You held your ground, and you won. I hung up the phone and just stood there in the middle of the dusty living room. The afternoon sun streamed through the clean windows. Maya and I had spent a whole day washing them, and for the first time, the light didn't just illuminate the dust. It filled the room. I walked outside and looked at my home. The house still listed to one side. The barn still needed a new coat of paint. The fields were still more weeds than crops. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a castle. But it was ours. Truly, finally ours. I found Maya down by the creek, skipping stones across the water. I sat down beside her on the grassy bank. We get to stay, I said softly. She stopped, a smooth, flat stone in her hand. She looked at me, her dark eyes searching my face. Forever? Yeah, Maya, I said, a grin spreading across my face, real and uncontrolled. Forever. She didn't shout or jump for joy. She just gave me that small, rare smile, and then she leaned her head against my shoulder. We sat there for a long time, watching the water flow by, the silence comfortable and complete. We were home. It's been a year since that day. The work is hard and it's slow. We're not just fixing a farm, we're rebuilding a life. Silas and his family have become our family. The community has embraced us. Miss Albright still calls to check in. The house is warmer now, filled with the smell of Maya's baking and the sound of her laughter. The fields are slowly being tilled, prepared for a real planting next spring. I found a part-time job at the local feed store to keep us going. It's not an easy life, but it's a good one. It's a real one. Sometimes, at night, I take out Arthur's journal and I read his words. I think about the choice he made, to plant a seed of hope in the darkness and trust that someone would be there to find it. An inheritance isn't always about money or property. Sometimes it's a story. Sometimes it's a second chance. He gave us that. He gave us a foundation to stand on, a place to put down roots after a lifetime of being told we didn't belong anywhere. This land has good bones. Silas was right. And now, we're the ones who get to give it a heart. You know, a lot of people go through life feeling like they're just being pushed around by systems they can't control. The foster system, the legal system, the banking system. They can make you feel small, powerless. They can make you feel like your story doesn't matter. But what I learned out here, in this quiet valley, is that you can't let them be the only ones who get to write your story. Sometimes you have to find the hidden cellar, open the old box, and read the history that gives you the strength to write your own ending. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to fight for your own place in the world, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. This channel is a community for people who understand that the hardest fights are the ones that matter most. Your story matters. Don't forget to subscribe and be a part of this community we're building. Thank you for listening.